Welcome, everybody, to week number 16 of the Scholastic Sitdown podcast. So happy to have you with us here on YouTube. My name is Dylan Ward. That's Luke Jordan. As we start every episode, we are sitting down and ready to talk about the Scholastic Hockey League. We've got a fun one for you today, including recapping last week's action, including the Winter Classic. Speaking of the Winter Classic, the Scouts victorious in that one. We'll be hearing from Lake Forest All-Star Tommy Swift later on in the show. We'll also take a look at the standings, preview the week as we always do. Then we'll end with our usual question and trivia. Luke, how was your week, man?
My week was pretty good. I was doing a lot of hockey. Unfortunately, not a lot of scholastic, but doing some juniors. But man, how about some high school hockey this weekend? We're gonna get to talk about that Winter Classic, and I can't wait to hear about it from Tommy, and I can't wait to hear about it from you, two guys that were there, just getting to witness it, take it all in. Because I used to play there. We were talking about this before we went on. I used to play there like occasionally when I used to play for the Renegades, my youth team. And I saw the videos yesterday. I was like, there were not that many bleachers. There's no way they could ever fit that many people. And it just looked like a really cool atmosphere. So I'm excited to talk about that.
Yeah, Luke, it definitely was. And yeah, we'll get into that a lot this episode, but not a lot of games this week, Luke, but it was a packed schedule last week. Let's start from the top. If you remember, we uploaded our podcast a day late, so we actually were able to talk about the Loyola versus Fenwick game, that 9-2 final score in favor of the Ramblers. These two teams would rematch later in the week in a much different game, but let's jump ahead to Tuesday, January 7th. We saw Lake Forest up against Glenbrook North, GBN at home for this one. Our guy we're going to hear from, Tommy Swift, scored Lake Forest's first goal in that one, but eventually it was the Spartans winning by a final score of 5-2, and they outshot the Scouts 26-14.
Yeah, and Glenbrook North is just slowly becoming one of the best power play units in the SHL. They're up to third now with a 19.7 power play efficiency percentage. And in this one, they rack up two goals, as many as Lake Forest scored on them. And also, just Glenbrook North's defense has been sensational ever since the start of this season. You have Michael Raderman, a senior goaltender, who is, a 12 for 14 save game is typically not even his best performance. He has games where he stops 26 out of 27, or he always has these ridiculous save percentage matchups. So Lake Forest getting two by him, they just got to get a couple more shots on net, whether it's just testing him from the point, top of the circle, trying to create some more rebounds, maybe, because that's where you can get good goalies.
Yeah, Luke, and you mentioned two power play goals. It's not like they were 2 for 8. They were 2 for 3. So they made the most out of their opportunities with a man up. And the best teams in the state are going to do that to you. So you want to stay out of the box when you're playing the likes of Glenbrook North, New Trier, Loyola, all of those. So we're going to move on to Thursday. We saw two games. First, it was Loyola on the road against the Stevenson Patriots. And this one had a final score of 5-4 in favor of Loyola. And how about these shots? 33-32. So pretty even game all throughout. Loyola actually had a 5-1 lead at one point before Stevenson scored with 7 seconds left in the second period and then scored two more in the third period, but could not find that game tying goal. Loyola holds on. And the Ramblers, you know, they were a team that we might have been counting out a little bit in the last few weeks, but I mean, with the play that they've been showing in their last, couple of games, they're starting to make their case to be a serious threat for a state championship.
Yeah, I'll sound like a broken record because I mention this every time. I love this quote from Spencer Montgomery. He says that you can't play 100% for, every week of the year, every game of the year. And I don't feel like Loyola was doing that at the start of the season. It's hard to only say so much as a bystander, but Loyola has just sneakily won the games that they need to win, sometimes not in the prettiest of fashions, but they're getting the job done and they're grabbing 2 points here, they're grabbing 2 points there. We'll get into a game later in this week that was a huge statement win for them that they won on the SHL network. And now all of a sudden, while everybody's been talking about, oh, GBN best points percentage, they've been so good. Oh, New Trier, great as always. They have just slowly snuck into the podium. So Loyola's been doing a great job and they've been consistent. And that's what you need to be a state contender.
No doubt about that, Luke. Also on Thursday, we saw Carmel Catholic victorious 4-3. They were actually outshot by the Fenwick Friars in this one, 35 to 27. But Tommy Steiner, Carmel's captain goaltender, with a pretty nice performance in spite of allowing 3 goals, 32 saves. And the Corsairs, again, we talk about fighting for that playoff positioning, that last spot in the SHL. This was a huge win for them.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. And I give a lot of credit to Fenwick. I mean, you put up 35 shots in a game. Typically, the stats are saying if you can outshoot your opponent and put up that many, you're fatiguing the goalie, you're getting shots by. But Carmel able to get 4 goals on 27 shots. And I've always thought Carmel's had a very slept on goaltender duo of Steiner and Stanley. I just think they're both guys who we've seen before, get action in the Scholastic division, and they're becoming more experienced, and they've had some great games as of late. So credit to the Corsairs.
All right, next up, Friday night, both Glenbrook teams victorious on the road in the only 2 games. Glenbrook South with a 4-1 win over the York Dukes. Blake Hoffer had 3 points in that one, 2 goals and an assist. And how about this one, Luke? When last week's episode, you were saying you better get your popcorn ready, but it ended up not being a very entertaining game. Maybe if you are a Glenbrook North Spartans fan, a
Yeah.
6-0 victory. It was 5-0 after the second, and something we don't see a lot in the SHL is those 5 goal leads at the end of the period. No ice cut, running clock in the third. They get one more goal on the board to make it 6-0. Michael Raderman plays the first 2 periods and the first 7 minutes of the third, and Adam Silver gets the nod from Evan Polakidis to close out the game. So those two get the combined shutout. And you talk about Glenbrook North, they were outshot in this one 29-21, and 6 goals on 21 shots against a really talented goaltender in Brody Netsky is as definition as close to a definition of a statement win as you get.
Oh my gosh. I mean, don't even get me started. I saw this final score, you posted it, and I was like, what in the world did I just miss? I got off one of my own broadcasts and I was like, Dylan must have had a typo or something. Because I did say this was going to be a close game, and I apologize. I can't predict the future. But boy, 3 goals in the first. If you told me GBN would be leading 3-0 after the first, Brody Netsky is a tall goaltender, and GBN must have just been finding where he isn't somehow. And one other thing I wanted to note, obviously you mentioned they were outshot, but how about just a disciplined game from Coach Pulakidis' Spartans? Not a single penalty. That helped them hold on to the lead and not let it go here, not let it go there from St. Ignatius' power play. So if you don't commit any penalties in a game, you've got a pretty good chance of winning.
A really good point, Luke. And then moving on, Saturday and Sunday saw a combined 8 total games across the 2 days. Let's get right into it. On Saturday, there were 3 games. We saw New Trier Green taking down Carmel Catholic 5-1 in what was a pretty dominant performance by New Trier. This is the exact same final score that Carmel beat New Trier by at the start of the season. So the Trevians, not afraid to you know, let them fly, and they scored 2 power play goals just like GBN did in that earlier game this week.
Yeah, and Carmel, you talk about how this league has a lot of parity. Carmel beats New Trier 5-1. New Trier hands it back to him, and New Trier definitely still probably feeling a little bit sour about that game, because you get to the point where every point's going to matter in this playoff race, and New Trier wants to be the regular season champions again. And their top spot is in jeopardy to losses like those. And although obviously they've already clinched, if you're New Trier, you want to go to the top, and the race for the top is going to be a lot tighter.
Luke, you talk about, winning that coach's trophy, the regular season championship of the SHL. If you remember last year, the SHL tried something new where they had every game 1 and game 2 of the first round at American Heartland Ice Arena, centralized location, kind of had that tournament style. And the rest of the playoffs were that home away home series. And the SHL has actually recently announced that they will not be continuing that format from last year, and they'll be reverting to that home away home series for all 3 rounds, or like the final round, the finals, just one game. But when you talk about being that number 1 seed, having that home ice advantage, it's one thing to have the last change, but what you really look forward to is playing in your home barn.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, just look at the home away splits. We're gonna talk about it with Tommy Swift. It's gonna be one of my questions. Why do you play so good at home? And he's going to have multiple reasons. Just that feeling and that comfort of playing in your own barn. And there's a lot of little techie things that I'd like to get at one day, but it would take me about 40 minutes to explain it all. So we'll get to that another time. But
All right. Well, speaking of those scouts, Luke, how about this one the day before the Winter Classic? They come into Glenview Ice Center and take down the Glenbrook South Titans 4-3 in OT to grab 2 points in that critical playoff race. And, for this Lake Forest team, Glenbrook South had beaten them 7 straight times since Lake Forest came into the SHL. Well, they beat the Titans a couple months ago, and then they actually win the season series with this one. So impressive stuff. You saw Grady Strothman collect 2 goals, including the overtime winner in the 3-on-3.
yeah, and you know what? With these scores, it's typically the favorite just not starting off the gas in the first period. Like they don't score the first goal, they don't score the second goal, all of a sudden they're down and they're trying to claw back the rest of the game. That's not the case here. Lake Forest kept their heads up. GBS scored right off the bat, and they said, we're just going to keep doing our thing. And it ends up working for them. You don't see that too often from a quote unquote underdog, especially Lake Forest on the road. If Lake Forest is at home, like we've seen the splits, might be a different situation. But with them in that situation, able to pull that off, beyond impressive to me.
And Luke, you know what? You talk about the Scouts having that incredible home record, struggling a little bit on the road. For the Scouts, this is their first road win of the season.
Oh, you're not kidding.
I'm not kidding.
I thought they had one or two by now. Are you? Wow.
No,
Oh,
I'm looking at the
that'll feel good,
all of their
right?
scores to confirm that right now. So talk about dominance at home and getting those 2 points in OT on the road. Glenbrook South ends up tying this one late to force overtime, but to come away and finish the job is very impressive for the Scouts. And the final game on Saturday was the SHL Network Game of the Week. We saw Glenbrook North and Loyola Gold. It's always such a great rivalry matchup here in the SHL. Two OGs. That was one of our trivia questions earlier. This one, Luke, was about as even as it gets. 2-2 goes to overtime. Overtime ends 2-2. Shots on goal 38 to 38. We need a shootout and just for good measure, 5-rounder in the shootout before Anthony Donato for Loyola Gold gets the shootout winner. But talk about Loyola leading 2-0 with 4.5 minutes left. GBN scores Logan Lyons, actually his first SHL goal of the year on the power play. And then Josh Robb ties the game with 126 left.
Yeah, no, credit to Loyola to go into Northbrook on GBN senior night, what seemed to be a pretty packed place, and they come away with the win. Now, obviously, there is something to be talked about in this game. There was a goal scored by Loyola that could have been waved off, but I think a lot of people tend to just point at that and say that's why we lost. But just because that goal getting waved off there doesn't mean they're going to score a couple minutes later. It's not going to directly impact the score of the game by exactly one goal. Don't get me wrong. Did GBN get a little bit snubbed there? Absolutely. But mistakes are going to happen. Nobody's perfect. And for GBN, that's going to sting. But as much as it's senior night and as much as it's an emotional night, they're still a great team. They're still near the top of the SHL. And they're going to be able to hang their heads back up. But Loyola, statement win for them.
Right, well, a little bit more OT magic on Sunday, and we had one of those maximum days here in the SHL where 5 games are being played, so 10 out of 11 teams in action. St. Viator missed the party, but let's go through these scores. And with 5 games, I'm just going to rattle off the scores, and then Luke, if we want to touch on specific games, we can. We'll definitely touch on the Winter Classic, but first up, you got Glenbrook North at home against the York Dukes. Charlie Walker scores twice in that one for the Spartans, and GBN wins it by a final score of 4-2. Another 4-2 game in Lincolnwood as the Ramblers played at home against the Fenwick Friars, we talked about on Monday of last week. the Ramblers with a 9-2 win over Fenwick. This one, a bit of a different story as the Ramblers tie this one 2-2 late in the second, score the game winner in the third, and add the empty netter. And Luke, I don't know if you saw my Instagram caption, but something kind of fun about this game is Loyola scored 4 goals and 4 different ways. They got the even strength, power play, shorthanded, and empty net goal. So I just thought that was a nice touch. And you had the Glenbrook South Titans in against St. Ignatius, who were on home ice. And this was a wild one as well. St. Ignatius goes up 3-0 in the second. Jonathan Cesario for the Titans gets one back late in the second period, which is not what it says on game sheet, by the way. That's going to be fixed soon. And then in the third period, Evan Bennell scores a pair to tie the game. This one goes all the way to a shootout where St. Ignatius wins it with the winner from Jackson Steinloff to complete the season series sweep over Glenbrook South. So, St. Ignatius or Glenbrook South looking for some revenge this season against the Wolfpack, who knocked him out of both playoffs last year. Did not find it in the regular season, nor did they in the O'Grady Cup. So St. Ignatius 6 wins against the Titans.
And
Uh,
Dylan, real quick,
4 wins.
didn't St. Ignatius sweep Glenbrook South last year too?
They did not. Glenbrook
They
South
did
had
not.
one win in the first
Ah, I
game.
gotcha.
So
I gotcha.
so
So
that's
they've won a
now
lot consecutive, right? Because I was
say it
gonna
again.
say they've won a lot in a row then, right? Because I was gonna say if there's a team that I think of kryptonite for Glenbrook South the last couple of years, it's been St. Ignatius.
Yes. Yeah. And so it's 5 straight regular season wins for St. Ignatius. And then they obviously knocked him out of state, which is a 1 game. And then in the SHL playoffs, that one was St. Ignatius in 3. So the Titans did get a win in that series. But, when you're in those playoff series, you don't have the mindset of individual games as much. You're not thinking of, oh, yeah, we won that game against St. Ignatius. You're thinking of, oh, we lost the series against St. Ignatius. But
Mhm.
we'll touch a little more on that. Last game that was played under a roof on Sunday was New Trier at home against Stevenson. Wyatt Schmidt with the 20 save shutout in this one. It was the Trevian senior night as Luke Chu, Max DeGroot, and Harrison Miller collect the goals. And the Trevians win it 3-0, which is a convincing score when you look at it. But it was 1-0 New Trier going into the third period. So you had to think Stevenson. Just talked to Dan Wood last week, kind of you know, talking in the locker room, feeling like they're in a pretty good spot against this Trevians team. But New Trier closes that one out. And Luke, we'll kind of talk about the Winter Classic as its own piece. But out of those 4 games, what stuck out to you?
I would just like to say Asher Ali, going against 39 Trevian shots, stopping 3 of them. People might say, oh, you let up 3 goals, not a great goalie performance, but stopping 36 out of 39 is no joke. So a lot of credit there. And then we even chat about it before, just Glenbrook South able to come back with St. Ignatius. You're down, you're on the road. It's a late, not a late, but a semi-late Sunday game where you're a little bit exhausted from playing in prior days. And the fact that they were able to claw back like that, pretty impressive to me.
Yeah, and I thought the fight from Fenwick was also pretty impressive
Absolutely.
against Loyola, to go into that third period with a tied score. Unfortunately for the Friars, this loss did eliminate them mathematically from SHL playoff hopes. And we'll get more into that when we talk about the standings. But um, yeah, and I had a thought there, but I'll save it for the standings. And so now let's talk about the game at the Winter Club of Lake Forest. It was the Scouts and the Corsairs matching up outdoors in what was the first SHL Winter Classic. We've actually seen at least one more outdoor game in SHL history, and that's part of our trivia. So we'll wait on that. But this is the first, quote unquote, branded SHL Winter Classic. And boy, was it a riot. Tons of people out there in the cold, braving the elements. Of course, our technical engineer Jimmy was nice and warm inside the hut right next door. So
Okay, good. I want to make sure
yeah,
he was
yeah,
nice and warm because he even just seems miserable sometimes in normal rink temperature.
yeah,
So I'm glad
yeah,
that Jimmy was nice and snuggly, but you, not
yeah.
so much, right?
Well, Jimmy was saying, ironically, he's he's warmer for the Winter Classic than he is for normal Lake Forest home games at Alumni Memorial Fieldhouse. So, that's a pretty cold rink. But anyway, talking about this one, uh, it was 0-0 heading into the second period. Again, game sheet has a little problem here, but Grady Strothman scored quickly into the second period. As we talked about, he had 2 goals last night or the night before this game against the Titans, so he stays hot. Tommy Swift made it 2-0, held up to be the game-winning goal here in this one. Ben Vavra scores on the power play for Carmel to get back within one. But then Michael Catalano scores to make it 3-1 Lake Forest in the second period. And then the empty netter to seal the deal for the Scouts. And Luke, we saw both teams wearing their new alternates this year. So, of course, we had Lake Forest blue jersey, which was just voted best jersey in the SHL this season. And Carmel Catholic's jersey was the 4 seed in the jersey battle as well. So we had, you like to see um, the light and dark, but I think that Lake Forest blue is light enough
Oh yeah,
to
yeah.
pass as an away or, whatever you want to call it, light. But I'll tell you what, outdoors under the lights at night with some slight, flurries falling, those two jerseys, the brown and blue going against each other, was just such a spectacle.
Oh my gosh. I mean, don't even get me started. Even just seeing it on broadcast, I couldn't be there, but it just looked like a masterpiece. And you know what? Those Carmel Brown jerseys are maybe even my favorite. I love what Carmel did with those. The stripe across the middle kind of gives you a Montreal Canadiens vibe with what they're doing. And if you guys, if the Corsairs want to send one over here, get a little 98 Jordan on the back, I'd love to wear it on a podcast episode. So, hey, same goes for Lake Forest. You guys are one of my favorites as well. A lot of great new jerseys, but in my personal opinion, I mean, I think New Trier's is pretty new and nice this year, but my two favorite new jerseys, with an honorable mention to York's as well, are still Carmel and Lake Forest at the top.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And we'll talk more about jerseys and the game itself with our podcast guest, Tommy Swift. Great segue to lead into it. So we're going to cut to that right now. And that takes us to this week's guest. It is none other than SHL All-Star of the Lake Forest Scouts, Tommy Swift. Tommy, thank you so much for coming on here.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I just wanted to ask you a couple of questions. Lots of stuff over these last few weeks for you specifically. Want to start with the Winter Classic that was yesterday. You guys won 4-1 over Carmel. It was also Blackhawks rivalry series. Lots of fans in attendance as well. Just overall, what was the experience like for you?
It was awesome. It was so fun because I grew up skating there. I learned how to skate there, so did like half of the team. So it was a super cool experience going back to the Winter Club with like all the fans and like the bleachers behind our benches, like seeing all the parents and all the little kids that came to watch. It was like super cool and very electric.
Yeah, and that was considered a home game for you guys. And you guys on the season have one of the best home records in the SHL at 8-2-1. What about Alumni Memorial Fieldhouse and just playing outdoors, but more importantly, alumni that you guys always play at? What about that rink affects your play so well?
Yeah, so when the ice started melting because like the gassing and everything, we even practiced a few times at Winter Club. We'd like go before school. And now we mainly practice at Hot Shots, but like we've been able to practice at Winter Club and like kind of see what that's like. And obviously it's annoying that Alumni Memorial is like has been down, but it should be back soon. But as long as we're like at Winter Club or like I mean, even LFA is a great place, but it hasn't affected us too much, I don't think.
I want to talk to you about, Lake Forest as a team has been doing this, Winter Classic outdoor game for several years now, but this is the first time it's ever been an SHL league game, especially when, you look at the standings, it's a pretty tight race for that playoff positioning. So to play a team that you're right in the mix with in the standings in such a meaningful game for 2 points outdoors, how is that different from just playing kind of an exhibition out at Winter Club?
I would say like all of us came with a chip on our shoulder. Like we just came off a hot win off of GBS, and we knew like us and Carmel were like very equal, and we knew like if we beat them, like we would have been hot if we beat them. So that was like a big win. It was probably like one of our most intense games of the season, just because of how like close we are in the standings and with like playoff points. We've been kind of worried about like playoffs, but that was a huge win for us. So yeah.
And back on January 2nd, you actually got to play with a bunch of different players around the SHL against the CCHL. How did that bond go? How did you enjoy your time at that All-Star face-off at Allstate Arena?
That was super fun. It was nice like seeing all these players that I've been playing with like these 4 years and like meeting new guys. Like I played Winter Club, so I didn't really know like most of them, but it was nice like getting to meet them and they were all really cool. So that was super fun.
Yeah, that's always really interesting where, it's not quite the all-state game where it's, really laid back and casual, but it's got that good balance of competitiveness, between those two leagues, but also being that all-star game. You just talked about that game on Saturday against the Glenbrook South Titans. They come back and tie the game late on the power play, and Grady Strothman, your teammate, scores the OT winner in that one. And it's got to be just such a big win for you guys, as I mentioned, like trying to get up in the standings as many points as possible and to take the season series over a Glenbrook South team. What was that game like?
Yeah, that was a crazy game. There's like it was like a coaster like going up and down and like uh I got like a penalty in overtime that definitely hurt us, but like we were able to kill it off. We had to kill off a lot of penalties that game. We've had like a big problem with penalties this year, but I would say after break they've gone down. But yeah, Grady definitely came in clutch at the end. And I think that win also definitely helped us beat Carmel. And like we had a lot of confidence off that win. So that was really huge for us.
While you're nearing the end of your Lake Forest career, what is a favorite memory that sticks out from your playing time with the Scouts?
Um, it's like my favorite Scouts hockey memory.
Yeah.
Uh, Freshman year on JV Blue, we went undefeated and then won the championship in the end. I got a goal that game. That was definitely like because there was like a lot of guys on that team that I liked too. And like I was surrounded by a bunch of Winter Club friends that I played with. And that was definitely like although it wasn't as competitive, it was JV Blue. It was just super cool, like going a season without losing. We had two ties, but that was probably the coolest Scouts hockey memory.
And that's correct me if I'm wrong, that's pre-SHL, right? That was the year before
Yeah,
you first came in the SHL.
that was a year before we entered the SHL.
Gotcha. Well,
Mm.
Tommy, this is going to be the last one on my behalf, sort of off the ice, but hockey related. You guys are wearing the beautiful light blue jerseys at the Winter Classic, and clearly this year it's everyone's favorite jersey, voted best jersey in the SHL in that Instagram jersey battle. So, I don't really have a question per se, but what do you have to say about those jerseys? Because
Yeah,
just everyone loves them.
those are sweet. Jake Marcini, his dad actually designed them because I think he like
Wow.
does some sort of designing. Because last year Landon Mills, he also designed ours, the white ones, because he also did like designing. So obviously, like Mr. Marcini did like a great job designing them. And I'll be honest, when I saw him like on the computer, the design, I like wasn't sure about them, but then when they came and we like tried them on, they were so cool and like I've been like obsessed with them ever since.
Yeah, it's always so different to see him in person or on the ice,
Yeah,
full uniform and all that. It's really
yeah.
cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, last question on my behalf, Tommy. I've asked, I believe, almost all the skaters on the podcast this question just because it's one I like to knack at. What is your go-to pregame meal before a game, if you have one?
I never eat before hockey.
Really?
I never eat. It's weird. Even if we have like We have 9:10 practice tonight. I won't eat dinner until after at like 10:30.
Wow.
How
Yeah.
about a
That's why I
post
like
game
asking
dinner?
this question, huh?
Uh,
Learn something new from everybody.
You have I'm sure, if you don't eat, you're probably pretty hungry after the game. What's your go-to to celebrate a win?
um, we went to McDonald's after the Carmel game yesterday, so probably McDonald's or Chipotle. I love Chipotle.
Well, I gotta know what's your Chipotle order before we end this.
Okay. Um, I get a bowl, double white, half chicken, half steak, black beans, cheese, sour cream, corn, and lettuce, and then vinaigrette sauce.
I'm happy you're on Team
Guy knows
Sour
ball.
Cream because
Yeah.
that's a very controversial one, but I'm definitely with you on that.
Let's go. It's awesome.
All right, Luke, you got anything else or?
No, I think I'm all set, Dylan.
All right, well, Tommy Swift, thanks again for coming on the podcast, making some time. It was great to have you, and good luck to you and the Scouts for the rest of the season.
Of course. Thanks. Thank you for having me.
That was SHL All-Star Tommy Swift of the Lake Forest Scouts. Good to talk to him. We're going to move along with the podcast here, as we always like to turn it over to Luke here for our outside of the SHL look. So, Luke, why don't you take us around the state and tell us what's going on around those leagues?
Yeah, this is probably my most exciting week yet to present to you guys because we're starting off with the IHSHL North Central. And my goodness, I mean, we talk about tight races. This might be the tightest race in the state. So we mentioned last podcast, New Trier Blues at the top. No longer. Let me just drop the top five to you real quick. Number one is Evanston, 16 and 4, 32 points. Number two, technically number two, just playing a little bit more than Evanston. Chicago North, defending state runner-ups, 14, 5 and 3, 32 points. Number three, New Trier Blue, 31 points. Number four, BJHW, who just beat number one Evanston over the weekend, 31 points. Number five, Deerfield, who just beat New Trier Blue over the weekend, at 31 points. That's five teams within 1 point. 32, 32, 31, 31, 31. It is unreal who's going to take the top seed in the playoffs over there. I could only imagine how the rest of that's going to turn out. In the Chicago Catholic Hockey League, it's still Bennett at top, but we did get a matchup for the Chicago Blackhawks high school rivalry series on Thursday between St. Rita and Mount Carmel. That game is not in the standings yet. It was weirdly another game sheet issue. It was not in the game sheet, but it is a league game, and St. Rita won that one 4-2. I was there was I was there with Chris Dubiel and Jenna Rose doing that one. Fun atmosphere. St. Rita took control from the start. Mount Carmel almost pulled off a comeback at the end, but now St. Rita is able to jump or actually stay in that eighth spot with now 13 points, and odds are getting slim for Mount Carmel to sneak that last playoff spot over St. Rita at 8. That was a crucial game for the playoff standings. In the West, it's still Maine on top 20 and 5 for 59 points on the season. They also take the 3 point, 2 point, 1.0 point approach like the CCHL does. And one skater I wanted to highlight, Broden Oswald of Naperville Hockey Club. Get a load of this, Dylan. 22 games, 27 goals, 25 assists for 52 points over a 2 point per game pace for Naperville, who is currently sixth in the standings at a 15-7 record. To round out that top five to finish things up, it's Maine, Plainfield, Warriors, Lincoln Way, and Glenbard.
That's an incredible clip there. I mean, over 2 points a game. I mean, talk about the goal and assist split. That's over a goal and an assist each per
Yeah.
game. That's incredible. And I just I'm thinking about the higher ups in the IHSHL North Central, preparing for the headache that will be figuring out those tiebreakers if those teams can't separate themselves a little bit. Five teams separated by 1 point at the top of the standings as well is quite incredible. But Luke, that was very interesting stuff, and we're getting to that time of the season where it gets more and more interesting each week. So
Absolutely.
I'm excited to transition into these outside the SHL segments. Talking about playoffs of these leagues and what's going on with those. But That was great. So we are now going to move it along and talk about some standings in the SHL as well as preview next week. All right, we're going to move things over and look at the SHL standings here. And Luke, there were a lot of games last week, which means there were some updates to the standings since the
Oh
last
yeah, there
time
were.
we spoke about it. So let's rattle them off from first to 11th here to begin week number 16 of SHL play. Nutria Green in first place, 18-4-1 record, 37 points. In second place, it is Loyola Gold, who we were talking about has gotten hot recently. Four straight wins for them, 16-6-3, 35 points on the season. And in third place is Glenbrook North, 33 points, 16-4-1. And, Luke, this is really the first time I think we've seen Glenbrook North actually, get into that top three, at least at this point in the season with how many games in hand they have. But they're slowly whittling that down. Only 9 games remaining here for them this season. St. Viator in fourth, also with 33 points, but one more game played. And then you've got St. Ignatius in fifth, 15, 8-2 for them. So they've got one of the most games played in the league, tied with Loyola and Lake Forest and York actually as well. So maybe more teams have 25 games than I thought. But Loyola, St. Ignatius with 32 points. Those are your top five. All of those five have the X next to their name in the standings, which means they have clinched the SHL playoffs. Again, 8 out of the 11 teams make it. So a big pool, but it's not everyone, so you don't want to be one of those teams left out. Glenbrook South, number 6 in the standings, 12-7-5, 29 points. York in seventh, 9-12-4, 22 points. Lake Forest in eighth. So if the season ended today based on points, Lake Forest would head to the playoffs with a record of 9-13-3. They do have the superior points percentage to the team right below them, Carmel Catholic, who is 8-13-2, 18 points, but 2 games in hand for Carmel. So you never know what can happen down the stretch. Stevenson in 10th place, 6-14-2, 14 points, and Fenwick at the bottom, 6-21-0, 12 points. And they will mathematically not make the SHL playoffs. So that final playoff spot, while it's really a race between Lake Forest and Carmel, Stevenson, by mathematical definition, still in the hunt as well, but they're going to need a huge stretch down the end of their season.
Yeah, absolutely. Stevenson is about to be dragged under by the engraved body of Fenwick, who just got eliminated. They're only 2 points ahead of Fenwick. And if Fenwick got mathematically eliminated, they kind of go, oh gosh, we might need to win every game possible. And I'm sure they're aware of that. I'm sure Dan Wood's going to let his guys know that it's a, win or go home really at this point when it comes to an arrival getting the door open at the SHL playoffs. So I do expect them to just really empty the tank, and I wouldn't be shocked if they go on a run. The odds are very slim that they can make it, but it's not zero. And honestly, I think where we are right now, and this might be a boo bland take, but hear me out first. I think where we have the standings right now, those top 8 teams will make it to the playoffs. With that being said, I think we could see some major shakeup in the seedings. You talk about how GBN still got 4 games in hand. I genuinely think that they could finish first, but once again, they got to go on a run. They had the best points percentage at one point entering 2025, actually, and now New Trier has regained that top point percentage back as GBN has fallen to 0.786, while New Trier is above 80%, and they've been great. They had that overtime loss and then 4 straight wins. But York, they got to watch out too. They have not been on their hottest lately. They were able to win 2 games in a span, but they are as close, really, as Lake Forest. They have played the same games and they just have one more point. So York cannot just cruise and think that they have 7th place on lock, because who knows if that's possible. Because I think with the run that Lake Forest has been having as of recent, they should have a playoff spot. But York's got to watch out because Carmel might catch up to him.
2 things to add on to that, Luke. You're spot on about the York and Lake Forest only being separated by 1 point. You never know who could fall. And in a season like this, we're gonna say it again, and we should probably have a counter of how many times we've said this on the podcast. Any team could beat any team any given night, but
Ding.
when you talk about first round, being if you're the 8 seed, you're gonna be a team that's, maybe not as talented on paper as some of the teams at the top, but
Yeah.
you have a chance because that's why they play the games. And if you're talking about York and Lake Forest fighting to see who's seventh and eighth, playing New Trier versus playing a different team could actually be a huge difference going into that first round, which is a best 2 out of 3 series. So it's a little harder to find a fluke win and roll with it. You have to win those 2 games out of 3 in that set. So, if I'm any team, I'd probably take any other team in the SHL over New Trier right now.
Oh yeah, especially in a 3-game series. Now those little 1-game hacks, like you said, anybody can beat anybody. We've seen Carmel beat New Trier. We've seen Stevenson beat New Trier. Two teams that are currently out of the playoff picture. But you're talking about a 3-game series. I don't think Adam Cheris is going to let his team get stunned twice. Once, does New Trier go to a game 3? I think it's absolutely possible, but it's going to be tough to win 2 games out of 3 against a team like that.
And Luke, one more thing that we were just talking about, Fenwick being eliminated, part of the reason for that is they have the most games played in the league at 27. So even if they were to win out, the most points they could get is 18, which is of course below the playoff line. But for the Stevenson Patriots, they've got the second fewest games played. So they've actually 8 more games on the season, a potential for 16 points if you hypothetically win out. So, they might not be as close to elimination as it seems just looking at this and the points. But like I said, you never know. You play the games for a reason. And these last 3 weeks of the SHL regular season, which is kind of crazy to think it's only 3 more weeks till we get into the playoffs. But
Yeah.
uh, a lot can happen. And I'm really, really interested to see how all these seeds shake out. And then you talk about, you know, that middle range of St. Viator at number 4, St. Ignatius at number 5, Glenbrook South at number 6. With the removal of the neutral site for the first 2 games of the playoffs, you want that home ice advantage. You want to play game 1 at home. You want to know that if there is to be a game 3, it will be at your barn. So everything is up for grabs in the SHL right now, and not even New Trier Green at 37 points has clinched home ice advantage mathematically. So we've got a lot of things to, shake out in those standings, but really interesting stuff as we go down the stretch. And one more thing, Luke, you talk about Glenbrook North and New Trier Green, top 2 points percentages in the league. They have not logged a game against each other this season, as they still have 2 games against one another on their schedule, and they have to make up that third period from way back earlier in the season when the glass broke.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
3 results yet to be recorded in the SHL between GBN and New Trier. So a lot of a lot of shakeups can happen with those games.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and if you're in the top 5, you're excited that those two teams still have to meet each other because there's a 50-50 chance really of those games compared to how great these teams have been lately, winning, winning, winning. Well, one of them's going to have to lose, and it's going to open up some parity up top.
All right, let's dive right into this week's schedule here in the Scholastic Hockey League, week number 16 of the SHL regular season. Not too much action, Luke, because it is MLK weekend coming up. As we know, lots of teams like to go do tournaments during that weekend. So only a few games, but still some stuff to watch out for. So, first off, tomorrow or tonight, if you're watching this on the day it's uploaded, Tuesday, January the 14th, we've got the Stevenson Patriots against the Lake Forest Scouts. And Luke, this is where the home record of Lake Forest is going to be very interesting because, as we heard from Tommy Swift earlier, Alumni Memorial Fieldhouse currently undergoing some fixes. So for this one, it will be played at Twin Rinks, but Lake Forest will be on the home bench and have the last change in this one.
Yeah, I saw this and I was like, is this right? maybe Stevenson's home and they just mixed it up. But
Oh,
no, you're
I
right.
believe me, I reached out to Sam Schwartz to make sure. So
That's crazy. I mean, if they lose, that's unfair. I mean, this really is a true home game for Stevenson. They're so familiar with this rink. They practice at it, they play on it. But either way, you put that aside, and this is what we're talking about. Like, it's these games that at the start of the year, if you're like, oh, those teams are going to be at the bottom, whatever. But this honestly is going to be my game of the week with how tight these two teams are within each other. Now, obviously, Stevenson's behind in points by a decent margin, but they have so many games in hand. You win this one, it's not only deflating Lake Forest, it's boosting you. This is a huge game for Stevenson. And not only that, it's also my personal game of the week because it's 1-1 in the season series, and this is the rubber match.
yeah, and of course, with 3 games played against each team, you do have to, alternate every year, 2 games at for any given matchup, 2 games at one barn, one at the other. But luckily, these two teams did play each other this season at Alumni Memorial Fieldhouse. So even though Lake Forest will not have the perfect 15 and 15 home and away split, it's not like all 3 games of the season series were played at Twin Rinks. So they still had the 2-1. So yeah, like I said, at a home rink, Stevenson being on the away bench is at the end of the day, it's your home rink. But when you play, countless games there all season long to kind of be on that other side and, not have that comfortable last change, it's going to be very interesting to see how this one shakes up. And I also did confirm with Sam Schwartz that this game will go on Lake Forest's home record. So we'll
Wow.
see what happens with that. Up next, Wednesday, we have 2 games, which is the most we have on any given day this week. We've got the Glenbrook South Titans at home against the Carmel Catholic Corsairs, and we've got the St. Viator Lions on the road against Loyola Academy. That GBS game at 7:10, the Loyola game at 8:50 p.m. on that Wednesday night. And I also want to point out, Luke, I'm not sure if you know this, but I'm a Glenbrook South alum, and the Glenbrook 225 school district, consisting of South and North, actually have a unique final exam schedule where they actually are having finals this week for the first semester. So
Oh,
instead of having it
goodness.
right before winter break. So this game falls right in the midst of Glenbrook South's final exams. At the very least, they're home, but that's got to be a tough one to concentrate on when you've got that weight on your shoulders.
Oh, and I don't, no disrespect to that district, but that would drive me crazy
Yeah,
because
it
I
drove me
I'm
crazy for
beginning my
4 years.
I'm beginning my first week of community college for my second semester, and I just had a syllabus day today, and I was still like, my brain is gone. Like I don't know how you guys take final exams after a whole break like that. Now, of course, I was given a month. You guys probably got what, like a 2 week break, but that
Yeah,
would that would worry me. That would. Ugh.
yeah, right.
Let's talk about the game. Glenbrook South's offense has been really good against Carmel this year. 10 goals in 2 games. Got to watch out for that. So and GBS on home ice, like you said, but we'll see how that exam goes into play because it's not all physical, it's mental too. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, and then that St. Viator Loyola game should also be a pretty interesting one. These are 2 teams that are absolutely surging right now. And as a matter of fact, if I just take a quick peek at the standings, yeah, both these teams are coming into this one with large winning streaks. St. Viator 5 in a row, Loyola 4 in a row.
Wow. And that late game is going to be favoring Loyola, in my opinion. Whenever you get home ice on a late game, I always feel like you were more prepared for it. So Ramblers could really use that one too, as well, and how they've been climbing up the standings and could even get close to the top.
All right, then on Thursday, January 16th, Stevenson plays at Twin Rinks again, but for the first time as the home team this week. At 5:50 p.m., they welcome in the Fenwick Friars for this one. And, it's again, if Stevenson can find a way to beat Lake Forest, this could be another huge momentum builder as no disrespect to Fenwick, but when you're talking about Stevenson and the position they're in and your remaining strength of schedule, you would like to play the weakest teams possible in the league.
Yes, and this is where it gets interesting because you look at these next three games for Stevenson, Lake Forest, as we mentioned earlier this week, Fenwick, and then a week from this game between Fenwick and Stevenson, they're playing Carmel. Three teams near the bottom of the barrel. You need to win these games. You absolutely need to win these games because you know why? Let me roll off the next five games and their last five games after that. Home against Glenbrook North, away at St. Ignatius on a Sunday night in Chicago, away on a Tuesday night in Northbrook, away on a Wednesday night in Glenview, and then home against St. Ignatius. That's a gauntlet. That's a straight up gauntlet. Simple as
Yeah,
that.
it's a tough stretch, that's for sure.
So you got to get the points now. And you know what? If you can get 1 point out of a couple of those games in the end and maybe even grab a win or two, you don't got to be perfect, but you got to be darn near it. So we'll see what they do.
When you talk about standings too, wins and losses are what you focus on any given day, but when you look at the season as a whole, those OTL points are actually very valuable because if you lose two games in overtime, like for instance, the Titans this weekend lose to Lake Forest in OT, lose to St. Ignatius in a shootout. Well, Luke, that's 2 points. That's a win. So
Yeah,
really, mathematically, it's like they went 1-1.
they lead the SHL in overtime losses. They're 12-7-5. They might be at 500 when it comes to win percentage, but those extra 5 points, as you're going to see, are going to carry some huge weight in the standings.
Yeah, and Luke, their overall record 29, 10, and 10. So they've got just as many OTLs or ties as they do regulation losses, which is pretty incredible. All right, moving along. Fenwick playing the second leg of their back-to-back Friday night, the 17th. They welcome in St. Viator to Paul Harubi down in Oak Park. And St. Viator, this is their second game in a packed week for them.
Yeah, St. Viator's going to have a very busy weekend here. And like we mentioned, super close in the standings for them. This is a game that you should be winning, but Fenwick, never know, can play spoiler. They've had a couple of upset wins in the last couple of years, some big ones. We've even seen, whenever I think of underdogs, I always like to think of my buddy Nathan, who used to play Barrington when he was on that team when they beat New Trier in a shootout. So you just can't let your guard down if you're the Lions because you never know what the Friars can bring out.
All right, and then finally, St. Viator at the end of a back-to-back, both those games away. This one's at 1:50 p.m., so a quick turnaround after an 8:30 start the night before. They'll be at Glacier Ice Arena on Saturday the 18th against the Carmel Catholic Corsairs. And, for a team like Carmel, they're fighting for their playoff lives right now. So St. Viator, you know, can't write this one off on their schedule at all.
Oh yeah, no, this would be my second personal game of the week if I was given two in a week. But basically, St. Viator, you talk about that quick turnaround. That is beyond a quick turnaround. You are going to wake up the next morning. You might feel a little bit bruised. That game on Friday night is going to end about beyond 10. You go home, you go to sleep, you get up, you eat breakfast, might not even have time for lunch. And you're going and playing Carmel, who's had a break since Wednesday. It is going to be a huge advantage for Carmel, especially on home ice.
Yeah, Luke, it kind of has that like tournament feel, even though it's
Yeah.
SHL league games where you play at 8 p.m., you quick turnaround, maybe late morning game the next day. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how St. Viator handles that one. And like we said, that's it for this week. Just the 6 games. And then after that, 2 more weeks left of the SHL regular season. And it's going to be a packed schedule. And I also just want to throw out there that um, currently that third period of play between New Trier Green and Glenbrook North is unscheduled. And I have been advised by SHL President Evan Polakidis that game might be finished on very short notice. So we might see that this week. They're trying to have it. They do want to have it at North Shore Ice Arena to finish where they started. So from what I'm hearing, they're going to try and slot it in during a New Trier Green practice slot. So
Oh.
so we'll see. So we could have that game, the conclusion of that game this week. It might be next week or the week after. We will see. So before you come at us and tell us we forgot to talk about that one could be coming. So that's it for the week number 16 in the SHL. So we're going to move along to our final segment. All right, we're going to close this one out how we do every week. Thanks so much for watching. I know it's probably going to end up being a somewhat longer episode, but we had some good things to talk about and packed last week as well. So we're going to go to our question of the week. So, Luke, I will ask you, who would you like to see play in the next SHL Winter Classic if we do see another outdoor game like this? And I want you to think, it could be anyone. Don't think about where the outdoor rinks are located. Just what teams would you like to see and why?
Okay, I'm gonna go kind of off-road with this question. Kind of pretend I didn't hear you just said. But I don't know where exactly there would be one. I can't think of an exact rink. But how about down in like North Side Chicago? Let me just think big real quick. Wrigley Field,
Okay.
St. Ignatius, Fenwick, double Jeopardy,
Oh my.
CCHL, SHL game. Think big. Think big. Make it
Wow.
happen.
That would be absolutely incredible. And man, I
That or even just some like random like park district rink tour as like people just like walking the streets could just come and see. I think that would be
yeah,
really cool if you put in like a shopping center or something like that. And that does make me think about Parkway Bank Park. It's an outdoor rink in Rosemont, and I think York would be very delighted to have an outdoor game there. So definitely
yeah.
keeping York in mind for that as well.
I was just thinking about that rink in Rosemont as well, Luke. And it is a thing where you could really, it doesn't matter the location as long as it's somewhat drivable. I mean,
Yeah.
people will show up for something like this, especially after the
Hmm.
spectacle that was put on by the Chicago Blackhawks and Lake Forest Scouts. You could really have this game anywhere. It doesn't matter. And I'm actually going to go to another potential rivalry series we could see next year. They've got that rink out in Glencoe. How about Green and Loyola? It might be the obvious answer, but now that the SHL, the league, and the Chicago Blackhawks have seen what an outdoor winter classic could look like with high production value and add some bleachers, get a lot of people in the barn. I think the turnout for this game would be huge. And I think to have it be that local, just right down the street in Glencoe from both these schools, I think that you're going to have easily as many people, if not more, show up to this one than what we saw in Lake Forest. And just such a classic rivalry. You could have a lot of fun with the jerseys in that one. And, just every single game throughout the season between those two teams is a big one. And, it's two of the top teams in SHL history. So that would be my vote for an outdoor game.
Well, it's simple, but it's got the significant evidence to have it be that. So I respect it.
All right. And who would you like to see play outdoors? Let us know in the comments section below. And I promise you, the comments are on. If you go down there, I know Dana's out there, not able to, we're locking him out of the comments. It's not on purpose,
You
Dana.
owe us three answers, Dana. I
Yeah,
think,
you
right?
do. So that moves us on to trivia, which is Dana's specialty. And we're going to go ahead and since we messed up the comment situation, we'll give anyone 3 points if they can get all three trivia answers from the last one. So I don't know what those points do for you, but
Dylan will do your lawn in the summer. There you go.
yeah,
The
exactly.
the Nick Ventura idea.
Yeah, maybe take you out to a candlelit dinner. We'll have to see. We'll have to see. But the trivia this week is yesterday's game in Lake Forest was the first branded SHL Winter Classic, but it was not the first outdoor game in Scholastic Hockey League history. There was at least one before that. We need you to tell us what season it was, what the two teams were, and we'll give you bonus points if you can tell us the final score. So, when was the last outdoor game in the SHL, a league game for 2 points? Not Lake Forest last year hosting Highland Park in an exhibition. What was the last league game outdoors. So leave us your answer down below. Again, comments are turned on, I promise. But besides that, that's going to do it for us here on episode number 16 of the Scholastic Sit Down. Luke, any final words?
See you next week.
I like it. We will see you next week. And like we said last week, episodes every week from here to the end of the regular season, maybe even beyond. We'll talk about, nationals, but that's a long way down the road. So we will see you next week for the Scholastic Sit Down.